Joining me is National Post columnist Barbara Kay, also a board member with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms and a tremendous advocate on issues of freedom and free speech. Barbara, thank you.
Oh, I'm pleased to be here.
You cover everything. It's the columnist's life, everything from pit bull bites to transgender children to father's rights. You do it all. But the one thing I've found, especially in the last couple of years, is you've really taken a tremendous interest in the idea of free speech, because there's been a lot of material to work with it, admittedly, but you've taken up this battle in a way that very few of your colleagues, even in the fairly right-of-center commentary world in Canada, have. Why is that?
I see the erosion of free speech as the issue of our time. It frightens me very much. The trans issue happens to be a kind of focal point where the intrusion on our free speech rights have kind of landed in a very big way, and I think in a very dangerous way. But I see free speech on campus erosion. It scares me because it strikes me as quite Orwellian. The things you are not permitted to say, which is one thing, and the things that you must say, compelled speech, which is another, and a far more invasive kind of wrong. So yes, it has, and I think also the rise of Jordan Peterson probably encouraged a lot of people to speak their minds more freely on this issue. But I've been following the free speech heroes like Mark Steyn and a lot of others on Islamophobia, for example, for a number of years now. And it bothers me terribly that so many of my colleagues in the media have kind of poo-pooed them and said, oh, it's a kind of hysteria, you know, you're making too much of this. So I guess that spurred me even more to think, you know,
you mentioned Mark Steyn. When you look at a decade ago, Mark Steyn versus the BC Human Rights Commission and Ezra Levant and his Human Rights Commission battles, there was a fair amount of unanimity, even among liberal columnists then, that this was awful and censorship is wrong. And I really wonder where that went. I mean, I can name, I'm not going to, but I could name a lot of names of columnists that were very much in those gentlemen's corners and very much alongside the free speech issue as champions, because everyone in the press really specifically should be, and they've lost that. And I wonder how that happened, how even people that should be at the forefront of this battle have tended to fall into that trap of intersectionality, or that trap of thinking that free speech needs to be balanced against far mushier concepts.
I think they got sucked into the belief that social justice ends justified a certain amount of restraint. Identity politics has made it clear that the right to free speech ends when you start offending a certain recognized victim groups. And this is, people have stopped being interested in truth and more interested in comfort. The comfort of groups that are seen as vulnerable, that deserve our compassion, and along with that compassion, accommodation. And part of that accommodation is the need for them to feel safe. And this new right came along, the right not to be offended. So of course that has been one of the issues that galvanized me even more. Where does this come from? The right not to be offended, but only certain groups. You know, you can offend people that love Israel. You can offend Christians. You can offend white men of European descent. No problem there. So look, anyone who's interested in fair play, who believes that the foundation of democracy is individual rights and not group rights. But I think, to get back to your question, I think that my colleagues in the media, a lot of them, or in academia as well, they are afraid for their careers. They are afraid to step outside the group because of the internet. I think social media has had a tremendous influence on people, and it's not a pleasant thing to be Twitter swarmed.
No, it certainly isn't.
No, and I'm sure you know all about that.
Yes.
Well, I think we both know a fair amount about Twitter swarming, and you have to have a very thick skin. You also have to have a certain detachment that is born of perhaps independence to be able to do this. If you're, I mean, I'm old, not to put too fine a point on it, and I am financially independent. I love what I do, but if it stopped tomorrow, it wouldn't change my lifestyle. My mortgage is paid, you know, my kids are out of the house. So a lot of my colleagues, they have a mortgage, they have kids, and they can't afford to, you know, become toxic or to become, I mean, look at these professors that have lost their, you know, over what? Trying to stand up for freedom of speech. So it's become, these activist groups have achieved tremendous power to enforce legislation that is built on thin air, not science, the power to have people fired for a look, a gesture, a tone of voice, something that happened 30 years ago. So people are afraid, academics are afraid, and people in the media are afraid, and they also tend to believe that, well, if it's going to bring about social justice, maybe it's not too big a price to pay. A little bit of free speech quelled here. You know, well, if it looks like transphobia, maybe I shouldn't say that. All that, you know, once you start down that slippery slope.
Because the little battles are never little.
That's right.
When all is said and done. And this was the big problem going back to those Human Rights Commission's battles a decade ago. We were so busy fighting the idea that a government agency could tell you what you can't say. The idea, even I'd say 5 years ago, of compelled speech gaining such steam was I think foreign to even a lot of free speech activists. So now we aren't only waging that same battle as to certain groups, universities, government agencies, employers saying you can't say that, but also groups that are saying you must say that. And that was the challenge with C16. That was what Jordan Peterson first started speaking about. We saw that with the Law Society of Ontario, formerly the Law Society of Upper Canada. Very similar dynamic. Lawyers must say a certain thing.
And the summer jobs program?
Yes, you must say that you're pro-abortion rights. Or Trinity Western University, you must disavow essentially what is your core religious belief. And when that side is gaining steam, and free speech advocates, I don't think, have many successes to speak of in the broader cultural battle. I think we fought on isolated incidents certain things very effectively. How do we tackle this?
I think it's very difficult to tackle this because it's now systemic. And we now have, for example, on this trans issue, we now have entire medical associations that have bowed to, they're willing to say, okay, we're not going to stand up for science. We are going to stand up for the right of, you know, people to have what they want, their gender identity, and we will deny what we know to be scientifically valid. You have endocrinologist associations who are not standing behind their own scholarship, their own research. So when it's that systemic, you know, and you have politicians, social services, the academy, law enforcement, they're all in on it. They're all in on these, you know, they're standing behind the identity groups. They're not standing for freedom of speech. You have the Supreme Court entrenching the right to gender identity, which is basically saying the right for somebody's delusion to have precedence over another person's, your right as a citizen, not to be compelled to use invented words. So that's the Supreme Court. They found that right. They discovered that right. That right does not exist.
I don't even know if I would go so far as to say it's a delusion in many cases. I mean, for whatever reason, my approach has always been almost libertarian on this, which is if you want to identify as another gender for whatever reason, I don't really care. Where I take a tremendous amount of issue is when someone tells me I have to not only care, but I have to care in a way that puts me squarely on a side that might not be my own. And that's the challenge here. And I fear that we are spending way too much time talking about an issue that is such a minuscule percentage of the population. Why is the trans issue occupying so much space when it is statistically such a tiny issue?
It's very interesting. I've never seen a movement take hold of a population so quickly. Some people compare it to the recovered memory syndrome that turned out to be, a kind of social contagion and a form of hysteria. But this is, I believe, a kind of social contagion that has infiltrated and taken over every aspect of society. As I said, it's in all our institutions now. And it's a campaign that just seemed to grow out of nowhere and just kind of envelop us. And the reason I did say it is a delusion, I mean, dysphoria is the sense that you're in the wrong body, that there is such a thing as a wrong body. And by the way, gender dysphoria exists. I'm not saying it does not exist, but as you say, it's a very small part of the population. And I have no problem with them being who they want to be. What I have a problem with is them compelling me to say that biology has nothing to do with gender. That compelling anyone to say that there is no link between a person's natal sex and, the gender they decide they want to be. That's not science.
And the people who make what is ostensibly a factual claim are vilified.
Well, yes, and you are forced to use words that you don't want to use. For example, on Twitter, I use the word affliction to describe gender dysphoria, and somebody said, "You can't say that." And I'm
it's
like,
in a book of diagnostic ailments. I don't think
well,
affliction is all
hello,
that wrong.
yeah. I said, well, it means you are transphobic. And I said, well, I think diabetes is an affliction. Do I hate diabetic people? I mean, both depend on taking medicine for the rest of your life, okay? So if you have to take medicine for the rest of your life to keep you feeling well, then you have an affliction. But this idea, you can't say that. But here's what you must say. When I describe myself, I'm not supposed to describe myself as a woman. I'm supposed to describe myself as a cis woman. I don't do that because why is the default? The trans woman is allowed to call herself a woman. I must identify as a cis woman. The idea is that if I call myself a woman and I call her a trans woman, no, because her inner...
Now you're differentiating.
Well, that's
women,
right, that's right.
Do.
And to even mention you are a biological male who identifies as female, fine with that. I'll call you she, her, I have no problem with that. But I will not stop identifying your reality, and you can't make me. And when you're an ideologue, you think if you change the language, if you force people to use language that accords with what you wish were reality, then magically, perhaps, that reality will become reality. I mean, there's a lot of magical thinking going on here. And in fact, it's what's being taught in the schools. Magical thinking, unicorns, genderbread charts. This is all magic. And children believe in magic. And that's why it's exemplifies the danger of compelled speech so perfectly. And I think that's why it's in the news so much, because people that care about freedom of speech are particularly horrified by this. And there's something about gender, sexuality, that is the obsession of our times, that it is the singular and identifying feature of an individual, and these people think about nothing else. It's really a little creepy, and no, it's extremely narcissistic to begin with, but there's more to life than your sexuality and your gender, But once you're into this, it is cult-like. Once you're in there, that really is all you think about if you're an activist.
Yes.
People who actually do transition and are non-political, and I've met some lovely trans people.
Well,
they don't care.
They're like a lot of the gay and lesbian activists.
Yeah,
they just wanted to live their life.
Totally, yeah. That's exactly what they want. They don't want to be involved in politics, and they have no problem identifying themselves as biological males or biological females they know the score. So it's a very different kettle of fish. But the trans activists they've grabbed the attention. and they are
And
very
there we're talking about a small subset of a small subset.
Exactly,
Yes.
and they, boy, are they aggressive and physically aggressive too. And the people who are on the front lines of this battle are people I would never normally, associate or ally myself with. Radical feminists, or even just feminists who believe in original principles of feminism.
Well, that right there is a fascinating point, because now they've been given a name that is derogatory in the far left circles, TERFs. And
Yes.
I've never seen this word in my life until a month ago, trans exclusionary radical feminists. But even these women who would readily describe themselves as the bra burners of their generation are now privileged, and they're now not real feminists, or white feminism is the other one. Women that refuse to kowtow a feminism that also takes into account all of these other battles. And is there a possibility then that these groups will just cannibalize themselves out of existence?
Well, it's certainly quite a vicious fight, and it sometimes comes down to physical violence. This does not happen the other way, by the way. You don't have female to male trans people attacking biological males and having this out with them. It's only the male to female who are they seem very angry at feminists who insist that they have worked very hard for women's rights, and there is no way they're going to have someone with male genitalia counseling a rape victim in a rape center. Like, there's just no way that is going to happen. And these activists are, see, they're like the two mothers fighting over the baby, and Solomon, King Solomon.
Yes.
And he was very clever. He said, give the baby, we'll divide the baby in two. And the one who was not the true mother said, okay, divide the baby in two. Well, and then the true mother said, no, give her the baby. So he says, now I know you're the true mother. Well, the feminists are the true mother because they are, some of them are saying, okay, yes, you really are a woman, then you have to be in the locker rooms, but these other women, they're just not having it. But the activists are saying, yeah, we don't care if you women in the rape shelters feel uncomfortable with us. We don't care about your trauma. We don't care about what rape does to you.
It's about justice.
It's about, no, it's not, well, they'll say it's about justice, but really, it's about us. I want to feel like I'm a real woman, and in order for me to feel that way, you have to feel uncomfortable, but too bad for you. So there's a viciousness there that is quite scary, and the trans activists on social media that I've had interactions with, they are ruthless, obsessed with this issue of being called women. They, call me a woman. And I'm like, no, you're a trans woman, and I'm a woman. It's babyish, it's infantile. But in a way, that's what it comes down to.
It's Twitter, you're blending in.
Yeah. But I'm trying to give heart to other people to say, don't bow into this pressure. Don't change the language because once you keep going down that route, no word will mean anything. The person that controls the language is, that's what Orwell was talking about. This is where totalitarianism begins, is controlling the language.
Yes.
And that's where we're at right now.
National Post columnist Barbara Kay, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
For the True North Initiative, I'm Andrew Lawton.